The Watership Down podcast is intended for listeners who are familiar with the plot. There will be spoilers. This episode is scripted by Newell Fisher and Lauri Peper and is narrated, recorded and edited by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down Podcast episode 212, in which we will be going through Chapter 3 of the graphic novel, Hazel's Decision. This episode is being published on the 5th of November 2025, so for those of you who celebrate Guy Fawkes Night here in the UK, please have a happy and safe night. Changing the subject, you might like to check out the YouTube channel where I've put up a short of an urban homber I saw having a snooze on a shed recently. They really are beautiful creatures despite their reputation. Next, before returning to the graphic novel, we return, inevitably, to Pylon Gate. The Great Iron Tree Controversy. Owsler member Lauri Peper has followed up his last email with the following very well-researched observations on iron trees in Watership Down. For context, I received this several weeks before episode 211, the last episode. The 2 weekly episodes now mean that such context is important in establishing how ideas develop on this podcast, as email exchanges now tend to happen a lot faster than the episodes are produced. Anyway, over to Lauri. Quote, on his website, watershipdownonline.co.uk, Bob Cropman writes, quote, my contention is that PA65 is not the specific iron tree. Rather, I think iron tree is merely the rabbit's noun for a pylon. There seems to be more than one pylon mentioned across the story. End quote. I agree with Bob, and here's why. His argument resonates on two levels. It reflects how animals perceive their environment and how Richard Adams structures his narrative. 1. Animal perception and language. From the rabbit's perspective, the iron tree and the pylon line are not separate concepts, but two ways of describing the same reality. Rabbits don't assign unique identities to each pylon. To them, the line of pylons is a single unbroken presence, a track across the countryside. Each iron tree is simply the pylon nearest to their current location. This reflects homogeneity. Every pylon looks and functions the same, forming one continuous landmark in their world. 2. Textual evidence. Adams reinforces this view. He never asks readers to distinguish between individual pylons, yet multiple pylons appear throughout the story. For example, in Chapter 18 the rabbits pass under the iron tree as they enter the field at the base of the down. Later, Hazel instructs his companions to wait by the iron tree at the bottom. In another scene, they emerge in the belt of hawthorn and dogwood where the pylon stood. These references show that the iron tree is a generic term, not a unique landmark. 3. Symbolic and navigational role. For the rabbits, the pylon line is like a hedgerow or stream, a fixed feature that shapes their routes and helps them orient themselves. Each iron tree is interchangeable. The line itself matters most. The distinction between iron tree and pylon line is linguistic, not practical. 4. Literary reflection. Adams captures this unity beautifully. Quote, Hazel returned to the edge of the wood and looked out northwards towards the bright still fields and the dim pylon lines stalking away into the distance north of Kingsclear. End quote. Here the pylon line is almost animate, stalking away into the distance, a single entity rather than a collection of parts. Conclusion. Bob is right. The iron tree does not refer to one specific pylon, but to any pylon along the line. Adams chose this phrasing deliberately, staying true to the rabbit's worldview, a world where repeating structures blend into one continuous feature. Historical context. Adams and the pylons. For the rabbits, pylons were always there. For Richard Adams, they were not. Born in 1920, Adams grew up in a countryside untouched by high-voltage pylons. Historical records suggest the 132 kV transmission line between Andover and Thatcham was built in the late 30s or 1940s during the National Grid's wartime expansion. An aerial photo from 1948 on Bob's site seems to confirm this. Adams attended Horace Hill School from 1926 to 1933, when the area had no electricity. In his autobiography he wrote, quote, there was no electricity anywhere in the school, and To Horace Hill's lack of electric light I owe more than I can tell. Indeed, it may very well have been the greatest blessing of my life, for it was this which made me a dormitory storyteller." End quote. The arrival of pylons in the 1940s was transformative. Adams witnessed both the pre-electrification landscape and its dramatic change, a rare dual perspective that shaped his sensitivity to human impact on nature. The impact of pylons. Visual impact. Pylons altered the English countryside, sparking controversy long before Adams' time. In 1929, Keynes and Kipling protested their construction in the Times, lamenting industrial intrusion into rural beauty. A debate echoed today over wind turbines. Practical impact. Unlike modern turbines, pylons didn't just change the view, they brought electricity to places that had never had it before. This was a revolution in daily life. Given the scale of change pylons represented, both visually and practically, it's hard to imagine Adams treating them casually. His consistent use of the iron tree and the pylon line suggests deliberate intent, not narrative sloppiness. These elements are too thematically charged, too rooted in his lived experience to be accidental. Adams knew what pylons meant, symbols of modern intrusion, markers of transformation, and, in the rabbit's world, a continuous thread in the fabric of the landscape. Why it matters in Watership Down. Adams' deep connection to the countryside and his memory of its transformation inform one of the novel's central themes: the human intrusion into the natural world. Roads, farms, snares and the pylon line signal the pressures of human systems on animal life. For the rabbits, the pylon line is both a navigational aid and a symbol of imposed order. End quote. Thank you so much, Lauri. This extra context is exactly what this podcast is all about, and the reason why Adams may have focused so deliberately on the pylon line really is fascinating. The fact that Richard Adams' school experiences without electricity are almost only one generation further back in time than my own really brings home how recent our modern world is. And Watership Down is set far closer in time to that world than it is to our own. Anyway, let's get back to Hazel, who has some thinking to do. The Graphic Novel, Chapter 3. Hazel's Decision. Chapter 3 of the graphic novel has 4 pages and covers Chapter 3 of the original novel, which takes up just under 5 pages, and it has the same title as that chapter. We see a view over the valley in which Sandalford Warren is set. Hazel and Fiver are with Blackberry, who we see for the first time. While the brothers are both the same light brown colour, Blackberry is grey with the obligatory black-tipped ears. Hazel and Blackberry are in the middle of a conversation about Hazel and Fiver's recent conversation with the Freya. Blackberry asks Hazel if he seriously thought the Freya would act on their advice, and Hazel responds that he doesn't think he thought it through. He admits to not being as clever as Blackberry. He had never met the Freya before and had no idea what to expect. This humility is a really good sign for Hazel's future as a Ra himself. Hazel adds that he does believe Fiver though, even if no one else does. This produces an ambiguous from Blackberry. Hazel adds that at least he will be able to say he tried to warn the Chief Rabbit, then notices Bigwig approaching. Here, Bigwig is angrier than in the novel, and that anger is immediately apparently aimed at both Hazel and Fiver. This is surprisingly a bit closer to the aggressive Bigwig of the Netflix series, who arrives with Holly and allows Hazel and Fiver to think he is their enemy at first, before turning on Holly. When Hazel expresses surprise that he is off duty, he says he will remain so, immediately pointing out the brothers as the cause when Blackberry asks him why. He moves towards them in a slightly threatening manner as he makes the treatment he had received from the Freya and Captain Holly clear. And then he says that he is not bothered about being in the Owsler anyway, most of what he did having consisted of standing sentry. He now focuses his verbal aggression on the much smaller Fiver, who unsurprisingly does cower at first. But Fiver looks him in the eye and says in a shaky voice that soon no one will stand sentry. His tone is denoted by the fragile shape of his speech bubble. In a crucial moment, as Fiver begins to calmly silflay, Bigwig asks him directly if he makes things up to seem important or if what he says is true. This reflects the Freya's view of small rabbits such as Fiver that we learn about from a very different Holly much later in the story. There is a pause as Fiver continues to silflay. This is a much calmer Fiver now that he has given his warning as clearly as he could. Finally he looks up and says what he said was true, though he wishes it wasn't. The response from Bigwig is immediate. He asks, when do we leave? By doing so, you could say this chapter should be renamed Bigwig's Decision, as it is he who actually mentions a group of them leaving and not Hazel. Blackberry reacts loudly and with shock, adding that nothing has been decided yet and that a decision like this cannot be made lightly. And it is here that Hazel takes charge for the first time, making it clear that if they believe Fiver, there is no other option. He adds that both he and Fiver will leave that night and that they will take anyone with them who is willing to join. Bigwig immediately says he is in. Blackberry adds that there are a few opportunities in the warren, making it clear he is as well. He adds that the absent Dandelion will join them as well as others. Like all ideas whose time has come, there is a clear momentum now, and the conversation is far more on point than in the book, one occasion where the summarised script of a graphic novel works well rather than just being a necessity of the form. Fiver says no one is safe, and that they must persuade as many rabbits as possible to join them before that night. Bigwig says he knows some owsler who feel like him who might come. Hazel urges caution, though. Captain Holly won't mind losing a few outskirters, but owls are another matter. Blackberry adds that Holly will tear them to pieces if he finds out. Bigwig looks him straight in the eye and says, he'll try to. Things are suddenly getting very serious. Comparison with the book. In the original story, Dandelion is also present in this conversation, but here we are still yet to meet him. Hazel does not make any concession that Blackberry is more intelligent than him. In the original, Bigwig is calmer than he is here, and doesn't even notice Fiver at first, and his challenging of Fiver, though still referring to the possibility of him making things up, is more polite. This Bigwig, at least in this early part of the story, seems angrier overall, mostly due to his appearance. In the book, Bigwig resigns from the owsler, and the Threarer apparently asks him to think about it. Here, it seems possible that he has been thrown out after being spoken to by Captain Holly as well, though we don't know for sure. As I mentioned before, in the book, Bigwig refers to they leaving the warren first, meaning Hazel and Fiver. Here, he refers to we, arguably making the decision, at least at first, his and not Hazel's. We also learn of Hazel's thoughts on Bigwig joining them in the original, in particular his concern that he might dominate the group. But here, despite the possibility of including thoughts in a graphic novel, Hazel's are kept away from the reader. Finally, in the original, there is no reference to Captain Holly tearing them apart if they take Owsler with them, whereas here, Blackberry makes that very clear. And Bigwig, equally, is very clear as to how he will respond. Next time, the rabbits gather and depart.